So let's talk about a specific kind of heartbreak. It's one that doesn't usually happen with a big, dramatic blow up. Instead, it's this quiet, creeping realization that you might be the only one actually in the relationship. You see, this kind of ending, it doesn't have the usual signs of a breakup. There's no shouting, no slamming doors. There isn't that one big, ugly fight you can point to and say, that's when it all fell apart. And a lot of the time, there's no real goodbye either. No final sit-down conversation where you both agree it's over. The connection just kind of fades out. But the problem is, it only feels that way to one person, while the other is left holding on, wondering what happened. What you're left with is silence. And that silence is so much heavier than any argument could ever be. It's full of all the unspoken questions, the needs that aren't being met, and that deep in your gut feeling that something is just wrong, even when everything on the surface seems perfectly fine. Okay, so how does a relationship even get to this point? Well, it almost never starts with some huge, obvious issue. It begins with these tiny, almost invisible shifts in effort that slowly create an imbalance that just gets bigger and bigger over time. And this probably sounds familiar, right? You're the one who always sends the good morning text. You're the one figuring out plans for the weekend. You're constantly the one moving your schedule around to make it work for them. Now, they might respond, and maybe they're even really warm when they do, and that's what makes it so confusing. But you start to notice they almost never initiate. The ball is always, always in your court. And this quote just hits the nail on the head. Someone can say all the right things, I love you, I miss you, but the real measure of their investment, it's not in their words, it's in their actions. It's in the consistent, mutual effort to actually build and maintain that connection. Now, I love how this slide shows that imbalance. Think of your relationship like a rhythm, a kind of back and forth beat. In a healthy connection, both people are contributing to that beat. But here, one side is playing all the notes, initiating, planning, checking in, remembering the little things, while the other is, well, maybe tapping along in response, but that's about it. And you know what? Your body feels that uneven rhythm long before your mind is ready to admit what's happening. So this brings us to the million-dollar question. If the imbalance is so obvious, if it feels so off, why does it go completely unaddressed so often? Why does everybody just stay quiet? Seriously, let's just sit with that for a second. If you're the one feeling this way, why not just say, hey, I feel like I'm doing all the work here? Well, the answer is, it's complicated. And it's almost always rooted in fear. Because speaking up feels like a huge, massive risk. You worry, am I going to sound needy, demanding? You're terrified of admitting the vulnerable truth that maybe, just maybe, you care more. But the biggest fear of all, that by naming the problem, you make it real. That you confirm they aren't willing to step up, which would force them to either change or leave. And so, silence becomes this kind of unspoken agreement to just let it be. And this is so important to understand. This dynamic doesn't just hurt you in the moment. It actually actively changes who you are over time. Carrying the full emotional weight of a relationship takes a really profound personal toll. It's like this slow erosion of yourself. First, you start lowering your expectations just to avoid being disappointed. Then you stop asking for things you need. Before you know it, you actually start to feel guilty for even wanting more. And the final, most heartbreaking step, you start to shrink yourself. You become smaller, quieter, more careful, all in an attempt to keep a connection that's asking you to be less of who you are. Okay, so how do you get out of this confusing, painful fog? It all starts with choosing clarity over confusion. It's about learning to recognize the signs for what they are and actually trusting what your gut is telling you. And here are some of those signs, and man, they are telling. Feeling lonely even when you are physically with the person. That is a huge one. Or hesitating to ask for simple reassurance because you're scared of being called too much. You end up having these entire emotional check-ins inside your own head, trying to figure out where you stand, because you know you can't have that conversation out loud. And this question cuts through all the noise. The next time you feel needy in this kind of situation, I want you to step back and really ask yourself, are my needs actually excessive? Or have I just been conditioned to feel like I'm asking for the world, when really I'm just asking for the bare minimum of a real reciprocal partnership? And that's where clarity comes in. Look, staying silent might feel safer in the short term, but that unspoken imbalance, it will always, always curdle into resentment. And resentment is a silent killer of connection. Naming the problem might not save the relationship, but it will save you from the drawn-out pain of confusion. And in the end, clarity is always the kinder choice for yourself. So I want to leave you with this final thought. A true mutual partnership isn't a guessing game. It doesn't make you constantly wonder where you stand or exhaust yourself trying to prove your worth. It just shows up. It meets you halfway, not because you finally begged for it, but just because it wants to be there. And that is a truth that is absolutely worth holding on to.